2025 is going to be a year with multiple regulatory and legislative changes coming into the property market. What are these changes and how are they going to affect your portfolio? Hi everyone, my name is Justin Goldie, one of the founders here at Goldson Homes. We run a property company that specialises in property management as well as property sourcing here in the south of the UK. Now, as we all know, the Labour government took Parliament in mid-2024, and since then they've introduced multiple changes into the world of property. Now, of course, some of these changes have not actually been written into law as they're still being discussed in the House of Commons. However, they will be coming into play sort of mid-2025. In today's video, we'll be going through some of the regulatory and legislative changes that the Labour government has laid out in the Renters' Rights Bill, as well as the changes that will be coming following the autumn budget in 2024. So let's start off with the Renters' Rights Bill. Now, on the 11th of September 2024, the Labour government introduced the Renters' Rights Bill. Now, what they aim to do with this is improve tenant security, prevent unfair practices by landlords and letting agents, and just create a better standard for the private rental sector. Now, of course, this was much anticipated as they thought that there was going to be a lot more regulations coming into play that would affect the landlords and make them actually exit the market. So a lot of people are actually scared of this. However, what actually came through wasn't too bad. So let's go through some of the main points. So the first one will be goodbye to no-fault evictions. So currently in the UK, if you want to evict a tenant, you can serve them a Section 21 notice. This has to be done within, well, you have to give the tenants 2 months notice, but effectively you don't actually have to give them a reason to evict them from your property. Give them 2 months notice and they have to leave. This is going to be taken away, and instead you will have to evict a tenant using a Section 8. Now, a Section 8 eviction notice is one that you actually have to have a reason to be able to evict it, like a legal reason. So this could be rental arrears, antisocial behaviour, or just not taking care of the property. So obviously the impact on investors for getting rid of Section 21 means that landlords will have to take further steps to actually get rid of tenants that are in their property. So if you would like to regain access to the property to maybe sell it or to move back into it, it's going to be a lot more difficult. And the amount of time that it takes to actually get a tenant out, if you serve the notice and they don't actually want to, they take it to court, it could become a lot more expensive. So I think the main things would be is make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. So get all the documentation that you need when you set up the tenancy. And then also ensure that you screen the tenants properly. There's loads of websites. If you have a letting agent, they'll do it for you. If you're a landlord doing it yourself, you can get a company, pay them £50, and they will do a full screening on the tenant to ensure that this tenant is a good tenant. And make sure that you also get references to ensure that you have, tenants that are actually going to pay on time. So the next main point that was in the Renters' Rights Bill was rent restrictions and the end of bidding wars. Now, initially, a lot of people thought that this was going to be rental caps, like they have done up in Scotland, which didn't end too well. But instead, what they have actually done is just put in a limit on the amount of times that you can increase the rent, and this is going to be once per year. Now, most landlords actually will only increase the rent once per year, but this is going to be legally now that you can only do it once per year. The other thing is that when you do increase the rent, you have to do it in line with market rates. So you can't just put the rent up double, 3 times the market rate in that area, to try to get the tenant out. You have to put it within that market rent. If the tenant doesn't agree, they can go to a tribunal and challenge that rental increase. The other thing was bidding wars. So what was happening is a lot of lettings agents or landlords were putting the properties online for, let's say, £2,000, and then there were people offering a lot higher, and then they'd go to someone else who came in and said, oh, well, we've got an offer for £2,300, someone else would come put £2,500, so you'd get a bidding war. So they want to put a stop to this by essentially saying, when you advertise the property, you have to put a cap on it. So if you advertise it for £2,000, the maximum offer you can take is £2,000. Now, obviously, this is not too much of a restriction. Rents will what I predict will actually just increase that slight little bit, just because they cannot get that much higher when they actually advertise it. So the third and final point that I think is very important from the Renters' Rights Bill is the introduction of the Decent Homes Standard. Now, what this aims to do is introduce a minimum safety standard within properties, and they will introduce regulations around heating, insulation, and repairs. Repairs such as mold and damp in areas, because this can cause the tenant to become sick. So this needs to be done very promptly and effectively to remove these issues. Now, of course, if your house is not heated properly and the insulation, this is a cause of your EPC. Currently in the UK, to rent out your property, you have to have a minimum EPC of E, so that's the E rating. So they may increase this to maybe a D, but we don't actually know. But if you do have to get your property up to that minimum standard of insulation and increase the EPC, it could become a bit more expensive. So overall, I think the Renters' Rights Bill is not actually too strict, and it's not going to bring too many changes to the majority of landlords. I think it's mainly going to affect the lower end of the rental sector. So those sorts of landlords that are accidental landlords, haven't inherited a property, and are not sort of taking it seriously like a business. So I think that's the government's aim, especially with the Section 24, those things around tax, and within a limited company you get certain tax breaks. I think what they're trying to do is get landlords to actually view renting out a property as an actual business rather than, a sort of side hustle. So on the 31st of October 2024, the Labour government announced the autumn budget. Now, what they did is brought in a bunch of tax changes and a lot of legislation changes around tax and employers' national insurance. Now, some of these were effective immediately, others are still coming into play later on this year. So the main one within property that came in was the change to capital gains tax. Now, this wasn't actually to property, the property ones stayed the same. However, regular capital gains tax on non-property investments did change. So they were increased for the lower tax rate payer from 10% to 18%, and for the higher tax rate payer, they increased from 20% to 24%. Now, this is now in line with the property capital gains tax. So on property, if you're a lower tax rate payer, you'll be paying 18% on any gains you make within property. And if you're a higher tax rate payer, you'll be paying 24%. So this has actually been held. And the inheritance tax on property, that has also been held until 2030. So another big change that came into the property world once Labour announced the autumn budget was the change to stamp duty land tax. Now, what they did do is increased it if you're buying an additional property. This has happened straight away from 3% to 5%. So if you're buying an additional property to your actual home, you'll be paying 5% on top of the actual fee, and this is on the entire purchase price of the property. So quite a big change, 2% increase. So expect to, if you haven't bought property for the last year, you will probably see that your stamp duty has gone up. So factor that into your calculations. The next big change is the lowering of the stamp duty land tax threshold. This will happen in April 2025. So what it is, the minimum threshold currently, if you purchase a property up to 250,000, or the first 250,000 of any property purchase is tax free. What they'll be doing is now lowering that rate back down, because the Conservative government actually increased it from 125 to 125,000. The Labour government is now bringing that back into play. So any amounts from 125,000 to 250,000 will be taxed at 2%. So this has quite big implications on investors and people looking to purchase property in general. What it will do is actually raise the upfront cost. Now that extra 2% is going to raise it, and this may affect decisions, especially if you're buying a portfolio or expanding your portfolio in more expensive areas. A lot of these tax changes, especially the one that's already in play, as well as the threshold in areas in the southeast and London, it may affect, maybe purchasing there. So you might want to think about going up north, where you could purchase a property for 125,000 and not have to pay any stamp duty, rather than purchasing a property down in the southeast where you're paying, maybe 300 to £400,000, and you have to pay that extra stamp duty. So I hope this video has been helpful in ensuring that you are kept up to date with all the legislative and regulatory changes that are coming in 2025. Now, obviously, the 2024 autumn budget actually listed the dates that all these changes will be coming into play. Most of them were effective straight away. Now, the Renters' Rights Bill, on the other hand, this does not have an actual set date of when it will be coming out because it's still being discussed in Parliament. So to stay up to date with any new information that comes from the Renters' Rights Bill, you need to be updated on this, and there's a much easier way than searching it for yourself. You can sign up to the Goldson Homes newsletter. That will be in the link below. So yeah, sign up to the newsletter. There's loads of helpful information on there, a lot of property management knowledge that we display in there in our mini articles. So yeah, I hope you found this video helpful. If you have, hit the like button below, as well as tell us any ideas or any content that you would like us to talk about on the next one. Thank you very much. See you later.